All right, well, it's time for my favorite segment, Breaking Bad, Bob, and we love you, everyone who listens to our full podcast every week. We love you, everyone who watches on YouTube, and we also give a recurring special welcome to listeners of our new mini podcast, Practically Culture Breaking Bad, which you can find as its own feed on iTunes and on practicallyculture.com. Wow, Bob, what a cliffhanger, huh?
Holy cow. This takes me back to my 24 days when I was binge watching that show after missing it when it first came out.
Yeah.
And yeah, I would definitely not have paused to wait for the next episode, but I am forced to, so I gotta wait a week.
It sure seems there's pretty much no way Hank and Steve Gomez will get out of this alive, right?
Well, right, that I guess, but it seemed that way the way the scene ended where they didn't die. And everyone has to reload after shooting like a bazillion bullets, so they could walk away from this somehow magically, since there was already magic that happened in the way the scene was portrayed in the first place.
Yeah, okay. So we may as well start on this column right
Right.
away, right? There's some believability and plausibility issues with this episode. And yeah, there were like 8 of these guys with humongous weapons, like what, 20, 30 feet tops away from each other, firing for a long time in gunfight minutes at least,
Yeah.
and they couldn't hit either of these two dudes. That sounds pretty bizarre.
Right, and these two dudes were popping up like gophers, Steve Gomez and Hank, shooting back with their shotgun and pistol, and uh, I don't know. I heard I didn't hear pauses. Okay, we don't have to go into this level of detail, but I didn't hear pauses in the gunfire from the one side when the other side was getting up with their pew pew. It just seemed like unless you're aiming into the air with these AK-47-esque guns, like wow.
Yeah, well, they hit the cars a lot. You could see all the bullets going through, so they weren't missing by that much. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
anyway. But so that happened, but you're right. The fact that it happened that way and that everyone was missing means maybe there's some way Hank and Steve Gomez will come out alive, but I don't know. It really doesn't seem like they will.
Yeah.
And maybe not Jesse or Walt either, although they probably will. I've got still a few episodes left. It seems bizarre that especially Walt would die in a random shootout, though. You
Oh,
never know
Walt
about
can't die,
Jesse. That's
but
right.
Walt
We've
can't
seen him
die
in the
'cause
future.
yeah, we've seen him in the future. And Jesse, yeah, I want to place bets on whether or not he's going to survive. I don't think this is the time he's going to die. I think it's more about Hank and Steve, but one wonders who's going to live and who's going to die. You know, it's interesting because I've talked about this with a couple of friends and before even getting to this stage where we're doing a show about it, and it's all over the place. Some friends are like, "Oh no, no one's going to die. They're all going to live," and other friends are like, "Anyone could die." I'm like, "Okay, well, there you go."
You know, so this show, we got a couple moments that the show has been building up to. You know, Jesse and Hank combining and finally outsmarting Walt. Hank arresting Walt. It seems like that's been a pending scene that we've been building up to potentially. Huge moments for this show. Not to mention a big time shootout with the white supremacists we've already talked about. But Bob, for some reason, I'm not quite unsatisfied by it all.
Tell me more.
So, this episode continued the trend we've seen lately of Walt's old self emerging and Heisenberg disappearing. You know, so Walt found some principles last week, sorta. Walt ignored plenty of clues and let himself be outsmarted by Jesse and Hank this time, but it didn't seem like outsmart Walt worthy to me. Right? Is this really how it goes? He just loses his smarts and his luck? uh, he yells into the phone. He confesses everything that he's done. He drives straight to the place, even though he hasn't seen Jesse for a while. He knows Hank's out there trying to get him. He's got the clues from Saul that Huell's been gone. It seems like he could put some of this together, or at least be more cautious than he was. I would think.
Yeah, I guess the flip side of that, the nicer way to put it is Hank has gotten sloppy, or not Hank, excuse me, not Hank, Walt. Walt has gotten sloppy, and he's dying again, and he thought that he had this buttoned up. He's retired. He's trying to wrap things up so he can die peacefully with his family, as peaceful as it can be when your brother-in-law is looking for you and trying to rat you out. But I'm saying all that as if I have some underlying basis for why the show would want to show him being so sloppy as a result of anything more than the show ending, which I'm coming up blank a little bit. So I agree with you.
So, well, here's the weird thing, though. I have read, well, at least I've read 3 or 4 of my very favorite TV critics,
Hmm.
and pretty much everyone seems to think, from the critics' point of view, that this was an amazing episode. And I'm okay with plots that stretch believability sometimes. But what I'm not understanding is Walt. This isn't the Walt that I've gotten to know for 5 seasons. First, like I say, first we saw Walt say no killing Hank because he's family.
Mm.
But when family become this important to him, sure, family was always there in the background. But I feel like we've seen Walt choose empire building over family plenty. He's been on the outs with Skylar like half the series. He's certainly jerked his kids around. Um, eh, he's chooses empire building over family. That's the Walt I know, at least. And same with Jesse. Jesse's been jerked around by Hank, by Walt this whole time. So I don't know why he couldn't bring himself to kill him last episode. And like I say, there were enough clues for him to at least be cautious that we got this episode. So I don't know why Walt just got dumb all of a sudden. You mentioned, I suppose, that we've just seen Walt getting sloppier and sloppier. And if that's how this goes, it just Walt destroys himself by being just getting stupid. I don't know. It doesn't make sense. This Walt isn't the Walt that I've gotten to know over the course of this show, and so it doesn't make sense to me.
So let me ask you this, as a hypothetical: do you think the show should have done this in a way that made it so that Hank had a more brilliant plan, and or the way that Hank went about manipulating Walt could showcase Walt not being so sloppy, but still like there was no way out of not being taken advantage of? Or do you wish the show would have just not had as much Walt, being caught, regardless of what Hank does?
Good question, right? I mean, because there's still the confession hanging out there. If Walt
Yeah,
pulls a gun, shoots at Hank, and then Walt dies, that confession surfaces, and Hank's fucked, right?
right, right. Yeah, there's nothing. That's
I,
really
I
a
just
hard one.
don't know. But okay, but I'll take your question more seriously. How could Hank have outsmarted Walt a little bit better? Well, here's one of the things that eats at me the most. When Hank says to Walt, "Yeah, I imagine the picture probably wouldn't have been quite right because I didn't see the barrels and the dirt was probably not the same, but you fell for it anyway." That's the clue to me that this wasn't a rock solid plan. That it was Walt just being stupid instead of a brilliant plan by Hank. He just threw a Hail Mary. It worked this time, and I don't know.
Right. So that I caught that too, and it makes it obviously the show wants to highlight that it's more about Walt being sloppy than Hank being brilliant, or somewhere in the middle there, of course. But um, uh, for some reason, in these last episodes, the show's creators are creating an environment where people are questioning the logistics of how all this fits together, rather than the emotion and the motivation and the relationship
Yeah.
interplay, which was more fascinating, which is what made the show so great. And now it's just like a logic puzzle as it wraps up. So that's just to put a little bow on this whole conversation we've been having. Is like, I think we're talking about the wrong things for what makes a show great, right?
Maybe so. Maybe so. Although I'm always a little self-conscious when the critics seem to love it. I'm like, oh great, what am I not seeing that people who are professional TV watchers are seeing? But yeah, I'm forced to agree. The things I liked about the show must not be the things everyone else likes about this show.
Right, right, because we're talking about plausibility, plot points, and we're not talking about um, relatable characters or relationship stuff or emotions, which is kind of disappointing. I mean, it's still great, it's still fun, it's enjoyable, but it's not like it used to be. Where is
Yeah.
it?
Although I will say, just the implausibility, especially that final shootout. Well, but also Walt falling for it. I don't know if you've ever had something that you've believed in your life and all of a sudden you just stopped believing it, Bob. And it's like no matter how hard you try, it just isn't believable anymore.
Yeah.
I feel like we may have crossed the threshold with Breaking Bad. I'm not usually someone who really holds TV shows to 100% believable, plausible plots, but I guess they call this jumping the shark. I don't know. I think, oh, come on, instead of suspending my disbelief when I'm seeing things now in this show.
Yeah, all of a sudden you're watching a TV show instead of like an alternate reality of really complex characters. I hear you.
Right. But we can talk about some things. I mean, like the cinematography, the acting, the dialogue. It's all really great. This is a great show, obviously. So there's more to talk about. What about how did you feel about the moment when Hank had won, when he had arrested Walt and he had him?
Oh, I felt I felt happy for Hank, I guess, because this and he got to call his wife, and they had a moment there, and um, I was thinking that this was just going to lead into fast forwarding into the future scenes we've seen or something, and he got him, he's caught, but. So I did like the effect of the gunplay, stick 'em up, shoot 'em out scene, as it was a twist for me that I wasn't expecting, even though I knew that potentially, since Walt was on the phone with those guys, that they would eventually come. But it was a long enough time that lapsed that I was like, oh, I guess they're going to go this route. Um, anyway, so to answer your question, I'm happy for Hank, but I don't want him to die.
So, I thought I would be happier for Hank. I'd be rooting for him more. But by now, um, I don't know if I'm in on Hank being the good guy of the story. Once he told Steve Gomez that he didn't care if Jesse died during the sting operation, I stopped having sympathy for him. He uses people just like Walt does, even if not to the same extent. And so I don't want him to win anymore, to be quite honest.
Yeah, no, the show does a really great job of portraying him as the stereotypical good guy, in the like Bush era Republican sense of like, ends justify the means and torture this, so who cares? Life is different if it's this life versus that life, and he was running wild with his own morality on the fly. But if you look past it really quickly, you can totally be on board with him, and it makes sense. But at the same time, he's he's not the good guy that we want in a good guy.
Yeah, so I don't feel like sympathizing with him over Walt anymore. And so I was like, oh, I was disappointed when Hank when Hank seems to be winning.
It's funny though, because everyone has like such an even amount of pros and cons or flaws and great things to like about them. Like, if you were to do a stack ranking of all the characters in this show, it would be a very narrow spectrum. It's not like obvious, oh, I think Jesse's over here as more deserving of a life, or Skylar's over here as blah, blah, blah. Like, I think you could take anybody who is a fan of the show, and it would be anyone's guess how they would stack rank people. There's no clear answers here. It's hard to know who to root for. At some point, you and I should go through these characters and be like, Skylar, you know, happy or sad, yes, no, as the end result, and see, how we stack rank them, because I think it's all over the place, which is what makes for a fun show, I
That
guess.
might be a great spin on our usual MVPs of the season for the end. This year.
Right.
So Todd, in his creepy, weird way, is actually intriguing me more and more. It's interesting to see him come on to Lydia. She wasn't into it, but and Todd probably has some latent mommy issues there or something. But she's probably the only woman that he comes into regular contact with. But it's nice to see that he has something he actually wants in his life. And then of course we get the contrast of him completely unfazed and robotic when Walt says he needs Jesse killed.
He's like, sounds great. Who again? Jesse? Yeah, I don't know who that is. Doesn't
And then he
matter.
goes in and drinks the tea right where the lipstick was.
Right. Right. I don't know what to think of Todd.
Um,
I think he's fine enough, but he kind of came into the show little too late, so he's more of a caricature for me, but he serves his purpose well enough.
sure, sure. Well, we've been going at this for a while, Bob. Anything more you want to say or final thoughts?
Well, so I have a question for you, Logan.
Yeah.
I think the most important character to disclose our particular opinions on is Walt. Do we want to see Walt succeed? Do we want to, or fail? Or I'll phrase it that way, just for simplistic
Yeah,
purposes.
I will admit, even though that I can take a perspective on the outside of this whole thing, my gut still, because he's the protagonist, still there's a part of me that wants to see him succeed. But the thinking part of me thinks, ugh, that would be really depressing if someone can be as evil as Walt really has been at times. He's not just doing the minimum he has to do for other goals. He's actually been, evil.
Yeah.
So I find myself conflicted, and I like that about the show, that my gut roots for him and my head roots against him.
Nice. Okay, so do you want to hear my cop out, eat my cake and have it too answer?
Sure.
um, I want, ideally for me, I want the what Walt has been working for to succeed, but I don't care if Walt himself doesn't. Like if he gets caught, dies, whatever happen, his fate is well deserved in a negative sense. But I somehow want everything he was trying to accomplish for his family to still play out that way in some way. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. So you want his family to get all the money and to live happily ever after.
I guess. Yeah, I'm splitting the baby. And Walt, yeah, sure,
Well, he's got
he
cancer again, so he thinks he's going to die eventually anyway.
that's true. That's true.
That may not happen, obviously. If it, well, it could or couldn't happen. Could or could not happen. So we will have to see.
Right, and the show's already reversed the cancer storyline once before. It could happen again, although, oh, surprise, he doesn't have cancer anymore again. Ah, what?
You
We'll
never
see.
know. You never know. If that shootout could not kill anyone, anything could happen, huh?
It's true.
So two head scratchers in a row for me, Bob. I mean, even when Breaking Bad isn't great, it's still really good. As I said, the acting, dialogue, cinematography, all that's still top notch. But still, I'm hoping it levels out and finishes strong. 3 more episodes.
Dun dun dun. Awesome.